as a rabbi who works on a college campus, so the question I get most often is, Rabbi, what does it mean to be, or how do I be a good Jew? And the answer I usually give is a story, one of my favorite stories of the Rebbe, when a group of college students visited him and asked a similar question. So a group of college students visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and they're in a conversation for about a half an hour, and it's very pleasant, and the students are at first obviously very overwhelmed at the immense presence of the Rebbe, but after a while are more relaxed, and one of the students asked the Rebbe, Rebbe, I don't keep Shabbos, and I eat kosher style, as it were, but I don't keep kosher. And, most of us are, kosher style or this and that, but none of us are so Chabad or whatever. So frum, so religious. What does it mean? Which one of us is a good Jew? And his friends kind of gave him a look, and were a little shocked at such a question, but the Rebbe just smiled. And he said, the answer to your question lies in the story of Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, our patriarch, and his dream, and his prophetic dream. That in the dream there was a ladder, and some of the angels were at the top of the ladder, or at the middle of the ladder, and they were walking down. Some of the angels were at the bottom of the ladder, or the middle of the ladder, walking upwards. And the ladder connected heaven and earth. And the Rebbe said, so this is the answer to your question. What does it mean to be a good Jew? It's not about where a person starts in life. Paraphrasing, of course. But it's about the direction that one is going in. B'siyata Dishmaya, Shabbos Parshas Tetzaveh, on the 10th of Adar Rishon, in the year Tafshin Mem Aleph, in the year 5741 in the Jewish calendar, or 1981 in the Gregorian calendar. On the 10th of Adar, on this day, actually, today is the 10th of Adar as well, about 43 years later, excuse me. This discourse was first delivered, and then about 10 years later, the final discourse ever to be reviewed and edited and handed out by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. This discourse, entitled Ve'ata Tetzaveh, a very famous discourse, comes to answer the question, why exile? Why all this pain and suffering? Why did we ever get kicked out of Jerusalem to begin with? And what ultimately is the goodness that's coming out of this experience? We will now begin with the opening pasuk from this week's portion in Hebrew, and then the rest in English with Hashem's help. Ve'ata tetzaveh es b'nei Yisrael v'yikhu elecha shemen zayis zach kasiv lamor lahalois ner tamid. And you, referring to Moses, and you, Moshe, shall command the children of Israel, and they shall bring to you pure olive oil, crushed for the luminary, to raise up a constant flame. The anomalies of this verse are well known. In all the commandments of the Torah, God says to Moses, command the children of Israel, or some similar phrase. But in this verse, the Torah says, and you shall command the children of Israel. In other words, normally, we see the way that God speaks with Moses. He just simply tells him, command them this, command them that. But of all the times Hashem speaks to Moses and tells him to command the children of Israel, in this time we see Hashem says, Ve'ata tetzaveh, and you, Moses, will command the children of Israel, which begs the question, we know every word in Torah is exact, and if this extra word is here, it's for a specific reason. Furthermore, this anomaly concerns not only the linguistic style of the verse, but also its meaning. The expression, and you shall command, implies that Moses is the commander. This needs to be understood, for Moses is only the messenger who relays God's command to Israel. Why then does the verse say, and you shall command? Again, the entire purpose of a mitzvah is to bind a Jew with God. So why is it emphasizing Moses is the one to do the commanding? Also requiring the explanation are the words, and they shall bring to you, that the children of Israel should bring the oil to Moshe, to Moses, since it was Aaron, Moshe's brother, Moses' brother. Aaron is the one who lit the menorah, who lit the lamps. So why then is it necessary to bring the oil to Moshe? We should bring the oil to Aaron. Another concern, the words oil crushed for the luminary require explanation, since oil to illuminate seems a more appropriate expression. In other words, simply put, it's a very strangely phrased situation. Why am I crushing oil for the sake of bringing it to the person who then is going to have me do the thing I need to do? I'm crushing oil so I could utilize it for a certain purpose. Say that. Seems very, very complicated. We must also then understand why in the next verse, the lights are spoken of as being arranged by Aaron from evening to morning, whereas here the expression is to raise up a constant flame. So this first verse brings many a contradictory idea in a very short verse, and very specific with Aaron and with Moshe, specific details that are otherwise left out of other mitzvahs, other commandments. So we're going to dissect the additions in this commandment and see why they're there and the eternal relevance to all of our lives. My father-in-law, the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, in his famous discourse entitled Vikabel HaYehudim, which was said on Purim Katan 5687, 1927, so that would have been roughly 55 years before this discourse was given, explains that the Hebrew word for command, Tetzaveh, connotes binding and uniting, and so you shall command the children of Israel is another way of saying that Moshe binds and unites the children of Israel with the Ein Sof, with the infinite light, with Hashem himself. And through Moshe influencing Israel and binding them and uniting them with the infinite light, Moshe himself is enhanced. For Moshe and Israel can be compared to head and foot, as in the verse, 600,000 feet is the nation I am within. So we're bringing a verse now from when Hashem is taking the children of Israel out of, or rather while we are walking through the desert with Moshe, and there are 600,000 men representing the 600 souls of the Jewish nation. But here, these souls are referenced as feet while they're being taken and shepherded by Moshe. So the Rebbe says that this is hinting to the relationship between the head of the Jewish people, in this case Moses, and the rest of the Jewish nation, where the rest of the Jewish nation are compared to like feet, and Moshe like the head, where the feet, although are not as obviously intelligent and receptive to spiritual light as the head, where is the head going to go without feet? So we are one unit, and that the feet itself, by the increase in service of the feet, so the head itself is actually raised to a higher place. So all Israel are like the feet of Moses, and Moses is their head. And just as a person's feet bring his head to a place that the head on its own could not reach, so it is with Moses and Israel. Through Israel, Moshe's feet, Moshe himself is enhanced. This idea is expressed in the words, 600,000 feet is the nation I am within. This can be interpreted homiletically to mean that through the feet of the nation, the revelation of Anochi I is drawn within Moshe. So we're using a very fun play on words, says Hashem, that literally 600,000 feet is the nation that Anochi, that I am within. And Anochi represents a level of godliness that is before the level of creation of the world. God, as he is not limited in any way, not that heaven forbid God is limited, but as he chooses to limit himself in the bounds of creation. So God, as he is completely unbound by creation and just hanging out on his own, as it were, to experience a revelation of godliness at this level. So this is achieved through, for Moshe to achieve this, it's achieved through the work of the feet of the nation, the Jewish people. This then is the meaning of, and you shall command the children of Israel, and they shall bring to you olive oil. Through Moshe binding and connecting the children of Israel with the infinite light, the Ein Sof, the children of Israel bring olive oil So bringing olive oil, we're saying now, says that Rebbe, is a metaphor to that higher level light, that higher level revelation, and we're bringing that to Moshe, meaning that we cause an increase of light within Moshe. To explain the above, the Rebbe first explains, so the Rebbe now referencing the Friedricher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, explains in the previous discourse we mentioned, Vayikabel HaYehudim, that Moshe is called the faithful shepherd. Raya Mehemna, faithful shepherd. This term means two things. Moshe is the faithful shepherd of Israel, and Moshe feeds and sustains in Israel in a matter of faith, i.e. the shepherd of faith. So again, another play on words, that the faithful shepherd can be seen as the shepherd of faith, the one who's responsible for maintaining the faith of the Jewish people. But then also literally to be said that he is the, so to speak, just like as a sheep herder is responsible for the well-being of every single sheep, so to the head of a nation, responsible for every Jew in his nation. This is what is meant when the Zohar says, the Zohar, the mystical book of Jewish mysticism, written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai over 1,500, 1,600 years ago, that in this Sefer, in this book, there's a statement that the supernal faith will be fed and sustained by you, Moshe. That Moshe feeds and sustains the faith means that he causes the people to experience it constantly. The Rebbe goes on in this discourse to say that Moshe's capacity as the shepherd of faith is true also of the offshoots of Moshe in every generation. The Jewish leaders in every generation strengthen the faith of the Jewish people of their generation so that they can experience their faith consciously. The Rebbe is now going to bring an example of Mordechai in the story of Purim, that just like Moshe served as not only a literal shepherd in the sense where he literally shepherded the Jewish people through the desert, but that his greater job was to shepherd the faith of the Jewish people individually, that each Jew should have an internalized emunah and faith in Hashem. And that Mordechai in the Purim story served as this exact role, but the Rebbe is going to go on to explain even in a deeper sense, or perhaps just, so to speak, had an achievement within the Jewish people in a deeper sense. An explanation of such a leader was Mordechai, the offshoot of Moshe and his generation. As in the Midrash statement, Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe in his generation. In other words, there's a statement in the Midrash, seems superfluous, seems unnecessary. Mordechai in his generation was like Moshe in his generation. So okay, Moshe was in charge and Mordechai was in charge. Why does the Midrash have to say this? So no, so the Rebbe says that this statement is a very deep statement. And it's saying that literally, just as Moshe had such an influence on the people that they followed him so devoutly, that this was the influence that Mordechai was capable of having on his generation. That's a very deep thing. That's an immense power and influence, obviously. Even during the period of Haman's persecution, when the study of Torah and observance of mitzvahs required self-sacrifice, literally during a time where it was life-threatening to study Torah and to do mitzvahs, Mordechai held public gatherings to strengthen the Jewish people's faith in God and to fortify them in the study of Torah and observance of mitzvahs. So it said, I believe it was 30,000 people would come out for Mordechai's public speeches during a time when learning Torah could be a death penalty, could be a death sentence. After expanding upon the idea that Moshe and his offshoots in every generation strengthen Israel's faith, the Rebbe goes on to explain the precise wording of the phrase oil crushed for the luminary instead of to illuminate. So we're going back to a question we had at the beginning. Why then would we say that the oil the Jewish people are bringing to Moshe, or rather is for the luminary, is for Moshe, as opposed to that the oil is to illuminate, what the oil's job would be? So the Rebbe there explains that during Galut, during exile, everyone is broken and crushed, katit, and therefore we reach the luminary, the essence from which the light, the etzem, from which the light is derived. In other words, that it's actually the experience of exile that allows for the person to be crushed so that that oil, that light, that ore can be released. So we need to understand the connection between this interpretation of crushed for the luminary and the discourse's prior comments that Moshe and his offshoots in every generation feed and sustain the faith, causing it to be felt consciously. The interpretation of the verse, "and you shall command," appears in the discourse following the concept discussed at the start of the discourse, namely that the meaning of the verse, "and the Jews accepted what they had begun to observe," is that they accepted it in the days of Achashverosh, in the time of the Purim story. What they had begun at the time of Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So, "and the Jews accepted what they had begun to observe" is a pasuk from Megillat Esther. So we know that Megillat Esther, that the book of Esther was written by the Chachamim, by the sages, and that again, every single word in every pasuk, every sentence is very exact, and it's oftentimes alluding to deep, deep concepts. So this phrase, "and the Jews accepted what they had begun to observe," seems strange. What they had begun to observe? What do you mean begun to observe? The Jews have been Jews for a long time. So the Rebbe is saying, what is it they begun to observe? This was at Matan Torah, that at the original giving of the Torah with Moses in the desert. This was when the Jewish nation as a whole psychologically accepted upon themselves Naaseh v'nishma. We said when we received the Torah from Hashem and Moshe, we said first we will do, and then we will listen. What does this mean? That's like good servants, like good soldiers, that before we even understand what God asks of us, so we're going to do it. But then, also like good servants, we're going to ask, and we're going to want to understand ourselves, because we're not just blind followers. It's our job also to understand, but only after we've already committed to doing the action. So the Rebbe is saying here, that says the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe, that when we say the Jews accepted what they had begun to observe at the time of the Purim story, we're saying that in the turbulence, in the difficulty of the time that they lived in, so they began to accept, or rather they accepted in their hearts, in a much deeper sense, they accepted what they began at Matan Torah. So Matan Torah was the beginning, and this was really enabling them to take into themselves Torah mitzvahs in a much deeper way, the Jewish people as a whole. This interpretation is similar to the Talmudic interpretation of the verse, "the Jews established and accepted." So this verse comes again from Megillas Esther. So the Gemara says they established what they had already accepted, meaning that at Matan Torah they said, "we will do," before saying we will listen. In other words, that before we understand, so fine Hashem, we're going to do what you tell us. So there was a Kabbalah soul, there was a Bittul Hayesh, there was the acceptance. But in the days of Achashverosh, in the time of the Purim story, they established what they accepted. So they began to truly understand and internalize what they had began at Matan Torah, at the giving of the Torah. The Rebbe points out in the discourse that this seems to be wondrous. For at the time of Matan Torah, at the time of the giving of the Torah, the Jewish people were at the highest possible spiritual level, and they experienced divine revelation of the loftiest sort. So what does it make sense that at a time when they were being subjugated, at a time when it was illegal to do Torah mitzvahs, where you could be killed for it, where it was very difficult to learn, well, not everyone was a tzaddik and a perfectly righteous person. You weren't walking through the desert with Moses just learning all day and not bound by any responsibilities. So how is it at that time we reached a higher level than when we were at Matan Torah, when we received the Torah? We were at the highest spiritual levels. No one needed, we ate man from Hashem, all the food that we had came from heaven. There was peace, relatively speaking, within the Jewish community. So how are we saying now that we were at a higher spiritual level somehow, or we achieved something higher during the time of the Purim story that we hadn't achieved at the highest point of our spiritual experience? By contrast, during the days of Achashverosh and the time of the Purim story, the Jewish people were at the lowest of levels, in addition to the usual divine concealment that prevails during any period of exile. So we know from the Purim story, the Achashverosh invites all the Jews to the party, and it's only one Jew who doesn't want to come to the party. So it's very, very difficult time for the Jewish people. For every exile is similar to the original exile, the Egyptian exile. And just as is written of the Egyptian exile, and they did not hear Moshe because of the shortness in breath and harsh labor. So it is, similarly in every exile, there are many challenges to the observance of Torah mitzvahs. So What is shortness of breath and harsh labor? So, a person thinks from the outset, take the verse at face value. They were slaves. They were molding bricks out of clay, etc., etc. Very difficult work. But on a spiritual level, what does it mean? Shortness in breath and harsh labor means they were not experiencing the gratification of their labor. It's like it's almost like pointless labor. There's a story of it's a parable, a mashal, of a king who wanted to test a person's will for life and what they're willing to work for, etc. And he found a poor farmer, and he tells this farmer, "I'm going to pay you 1,000 rubles a day, whatever it is, a ridiculous amount of money, but I need you to be in my castle at this time, and you're going to be here till this time, and you're going to be moving hay from one corner of a room to the other corner of the room every day. And then the next day you're going to move back from that corner to the other corner and back and forth every day." And the man agrees. Obviously, it's not even a question, making 1,000 times as much as he was making at home. And the first day he does it and he's happy, and the second day he does it, he's happy. Third day everything seems fine. And by the fourth day, or rather by the end of the third day, he goes to the king. He tells him he's done, he can't do this anymore. He wants his money for what he's earned so far, and he's going home. And the king is 3 days. He can't last 3 days. What happened? He's shocked. He thought at least a few weeks he would last. Not longer. Why not? It's tons of money. And so the man explained. He said, "I know I'm making a lot of money, but I'm moving hay from one side of the room to the other, and I'm working so hard, and then the next day I show up to just move it. I'm not doing anything. I'm not achieving anything, and it's driving me crazy. So yes, I know I'm making money, but I can't do this anymore." So in other words, this is shortness of breath and harsh labor. So this is a very low spiritual state. And at that time, during the persecution of Haman, so the concealment of Hashem would have been even greater. Yet, at the time of Matan Torah, when the Jewish people were at the highest possible spiritual level, there was only a beginning, we say. While during Haman's persecution, when they were at the lowest of spiritual levels, precisely then did they accept what they had begun at Matan Torah. So not that it's a contradiction that at the highest spiritual level we achieve one thing, but at the lowest spiritual level we're achieving something greater. This seems silly. No. That it's specifically due to the fact that we were so lowly, we were capable of achieving, says the Rebbe, this amazing achievement of the time. So the Rebbe explains this wonder that during the time of persecution, their observance of Torah and mitzvahs entailed self-sacrifice. Kabbalah's ol. Mesiras Nefesh. In addition to the fact that they exhibited self-sacrifice in not denying their religion, heaven forbid, as explained in Torah Or, a series of Maamarim given by the first Rebbe of Chabad, in this case on many of the festivals, in this case Purim, and they had chosen to change, had they chosen rather to change their religion, they would not have been harmed, since the decree pertained only to the Jews. Yet an extraneous thought never crossed their minds, heaven forbid. In other words, the Jews at the time, even though were struggling so much in their faith with Hashem and their observance of Torah mitzvahs, risked their own lives to remain a part of the Jewish nation, even while not actively doing the mitzvahs, when all they would have had to do is say, you know what, I'm not a Jew anymore, I'll be a Babylonian, and then they would have had no threat against them. This wasn't like Hitler's Holocaust, heaven forbid. And just because, if you were born Jewish, there's nothing. No, you could have converted out, so to speak, and you would have been fine. But the Rebbe says that even this the Jews didn't do. And it's this self-sacrifice that's only awakened because of these immense times of turmoil, and that within itself is a very, very deep avodah, deep service of Hashem, and a deep place within the soul that otherwise doesn't come out when you're standing atop the mountain, or rather when you're standing at the bottom of the mountain, but you're receiving Torah direct from God Himself at such high spiritual heights. So this awakening of self-sacrifice was caused by Mordechai, the Moses of his generation. So we know that it was Mordechai. He not only inspired the people, we said before, he would have public lectures, But at the party itself, that's documented in Megillas Esther, in the book of Esther, so we understand that it was Mordechai publicly standing for Yiddishkeit in front of all the Jewish people who would have been at that party, in front of Haman, that this would have been very inspiring, of course. So having such a character who, no matter what the threat against him, is standing in the face of such evil for the name of Hashem, just like Moshe would have done, so this would have obviously been very inspiring, both in the external sense. But the Rebbe is saying that in a very deep sense, this was a representation of the fact that Mordechai served at the same level and to the same degree that Moshe served as a faithful shepherd. So this is what Mordechai was doing for his nation. This then is the understanding of, and the Jews accepted what they had begun to observe at Matan Torah. That at Matan Torah there was only a beginning, and at the time of Haman's decree there was the acceptance. That as a result of their actual self-sacrifice for Torah and mitzvahs, they ascended in regard to this matter to a loftier level than the level they were at during Matan Torah. It was therefore precisely that the acceptance occurred and the Jews accepted. It can be apparently said that the interpretation of crushed for the luminary, that through katit, through being broken and crushed, we reach the luminary, is an explanation of the fact that precisely during the time of persecution, they reached an extremely lofty level of self-sacrifice. So now, saying before, we had a question. Why then crushed, when we're talking about the oil, that the oil is going to be crushed for the luminary as opposed for the luminescent, as opposed for being lit? When you get oil, you get it for its purpose. So now we're understanding that this was an allusion to the idea of a person in their being persecuted in times of exile, but having a spiritual leader like Moshe or like Mordechai to guide them and inspire them, that it's through this journey and process that the deepest aspect of their soul is revealed, a spiritual level that's even higher than the level that the Jewish person achieved at the time of the giving of the Torah, which was the original highest level that any nation had spiritually achieved. Because, says the Rebbe, Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice, stems from the soul's essence, which transcends revelation, the luminary from which the light is derived. We'll say that again. Because self-sacrifice stems from the essential part of the soul, which transcends revelation. What is revelation? Simply put, if a light is off in a room, you flip on a light, you've revealed what otherwise was concealed. So revelation is to reveal what's concealed. But what if you're at a place where nothing's ever concealed before you? Okay. So to reach this place is reached through a place of self-sacrifice. And it's from this place, or rather it's from a state of being crushed, that you can achieve and reach this place. The experience of the soul's essence. And from this place, the luminary, Hashem himself, is revealed. However, from the sequence of ideas in this discourse, where the interpretation of crushed for the luminary follows the idea of the shepherd of faith, that you're being crushed for the luminary. Who's the luminary? Moshe. It seems that the concept of crushed for the luminary pertains also to the fact that Moshe feeds and sustains the faith, causing it to be felt consciously. This can be explained, in other words, not just Kabbalah's oil, not just Mesiras Nefesh, not just the sacrifice when a Jew is threatened with life or death, heaven forbid, but also to understand consciously, in a time of non-confrontation as it were, godliness, and to really devote oneself to Torah and mitzvahs without any external pressure. This can be explained based on the following well-known idea. Jews believe in divinity and Elokut, with simple faith, needing no evidence, for two reasons. Be'emunah pshuta in Hebrew, simple faith. Firstly, because their mazel sees it, is a pasuk from Talmud Megillah. I'm going to do this footnote here. So mazel, the Talmud cites Daniel, that I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, but the people that were with me did not see it. Yet a great fear fell upon them, and they fled into hiding. So the Talmud brings this verse and identifies who were with Daniel as Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi, who, although themselves were prophets, were not on the level of Daniel, and therefore could not see the vision that he saw. So the Talmud asks, if they did not see, why were they frightened? And the Talmud answers, though they did not see, their mazel saw. Oh, Ravina commented, learn from this that one who becomes frightened for no apparent reason, it is because, though he did not see the cause for his fear, his mazel did see it. So the Gemara is bringing this thing called mazel and explaining what mazel is. In other words, although a person is not consciously aware of his mazel, he is affected by what the mazel experiences. You ever been sitting in a room and you just feel like someone's staring at you, and then you look over and they're staring at you? So we're going to call this mazel. Thus, if the mazel is afraid, the person will be afraid. If the mazel is inspired, the person will suddenly and inexplicably feel inspired. The mazel, therefore, because of its superior vision, guides the person through certain decisions, causing him to choose the path that will best serve his ultimate purpose. So this is from Likutei Sichos. So the mazel, says the Baal Shem Tov explained, is the part of the soul that hears the various heavenly declarations, such as return children, and through its inspiration, the soul in the body can be inspired as well. Otherwise, what purpose do these declarations serve? In other words, it says in the Heilige Tanya, in the opening, the Tanya quotes, the Alter Rebbe quotes, the Gemara, Tehi Tzadik V'loi Tehi Rasha, that the soul says, the soul takes an oath upon itself before it comes into the body to be a tzaddik, to be righteous, and to not be wicked. So what does this mean? Explains the Rebbe that this is not just a call from before you were born hypothetical, that this is a part of the soul, of the potential consciousness of a human being that exists within them, that calls to them at every moment to be a tzaddik, to be righteous, that gives them that potential and ability to actually be righteous and not be wicked. So this is another explanation of their mazel sees it. This is the part of the soul on high that quote-unquote sees divinity. So we say soul on high, so we don't mean physically on high, far away. We're talking about the part of my own consciousness, all of our own consciousnesses, that is on high, so to speak, that sees godliness, that sees life and experience only through a godly lens. So we're obviously trying to incorporate this into our consciousness, right? This is not the part necessarily we feel readily accessible at the moment. But our mazel sees it. And this causes the part of the divine soul that is vested within the body to believe in divinity. In other words, this causes the part of my godly consciousness that can rest in my body to consciously believe in my body when these two things connect. So it's not abstract. There's an actual part of my consciousness that's able to attach, that is these godly ideas, and I'm able to incorporate them into my own consciousness, not from nowhere, but from the essence of my soul. Another explanation given is that this faith stems from the essence of the soul, which transcends the level of their mazel sees it. So their mazel sees it, says the Rebbe, really references that part of the soul which is still relative in any way to the soul, as opposed to completely godly and completely unbound by any physical nature whatsoever, which the soul does have that aspect as well. And this aspect of the soul's essence with divinity is an innate bond that does not depend on any cause, not even a supra-rational vision. In other words, not a created thing, not an external thing, but an essential connection that the soul has with Hashem, with the Creator. It can be said that one of the distinctions between these two explanations, or two levels, is that the faith of the body-bound part of the soul that stems from the vision of the heaven-bound part of the soul is an abstract faith. For the heaven-bound part of the soul transcends manifestation, its effect on the soul, clothed in the body, is therefore abstract as well. Internalization of faith by the body-bound part of the soul requires the revelation of the innate bond of the soul's essence with divinity. In other words, that's very deep. Baruch Shem. So what the Rebbe just said was that even that very high level of faith is still an abstract faith in the form of revelation. And so an even deeper faith has to be revealed in the body for it to have a real connection with divinity. And that's at the soul's essence. Even at the body-bound part of the soul, so to speak. In other words, the same distance that the soul has with the highest level of the soul to the lowest level of the soul. So the essence of the soul is equidistant from all of it. So it's from that place, the essential level of the soul that relates to the body equally. So this is what has to inspire the person, and to feel that consciously from that level of the soul to cause it to go to the luminary. The Rebbe is going to continue. So based on the above, we can explain the connection between the concepts mentioned in the discourse, where the concept of crushed for the luminary follows the explanation of the idea of a shepherd of faith. That Moshe feeds and sustains the faith, causing it to be felt consciously by revealing the soul's essence, which transcends the level of their mazel sees, the luminary, Ma'or, which is beyond light. However, the phrase, crushed for the luminary, which the discourse interprets to mean that one reaches the luminary through the crushing of exile, indicates that the primary revelation of the soul's essence, luminary, occurs through the experience of self-sacrifice, which occurs primarily through exiled, which will be explained. The concept is as follows. The fact that the Jew's faith is such that he is willing to sacrifice his life for it stems primarily from the faith inspired by the soul's essence. For the faith inspired by his vision, i.e. his mazel sees, despite its great intensity, it is well known that the conviction inspired by sight is extremely powerful, will not invariably cause him to sacrifice his life for it. For such faith is based on a cause, i.e. the fact that he sees, and it is not connected to the essence of his being. The fact that the Jew's faith is such that he is willing to sacrifice his life for it because his belief in divinity is his essence, it is therefore entirely impossible for him to deny God's existence, God forbid. We can now explain the discourse's statement that the idea of Moses being a shepherd of faith, that he feeds and sustains Israel's faith, applies to the shepherds of Israel in every generation, the offshoots of Moses in every generation, that they strengthen Israel's faith to stand steadfast with self-sacrifice in the performance of Torah and mitzvahs. It would seem that Moses' feeding and sustaining of faith, as explained in many sources and in this very discourse, consists of imparting knowledge, da'as, of God to Israel, which causes their faith to be felt consciously. By contrast, the strengthening of the faith caused by the shepherds of Israel in every generation, as explained in the discourse, consists of causing their faith to be one of self-sacrifice. So this seems to be inconsistent, but based on the above idea that self-sacrifice is actually inspired by the soul's essence. We can say that the primary function of the shepherd of faith is to feed and sustain the faith itself, so that the faith inspired not only by revelation, i.e. the fact that the soul on high sees divinity, but by the soul's essence itself. In other words, that Moses causes the faith to be internalized in das and understanding is a result of his feeding and sustaining the faith itself, drawing forth and revealing the faith that stems from the soul's essence. As explained above, internalization of faith, bringing it into das, occurs through the revelation of the innate bond in the soul's essence with divinity. So the fact that the faith of the generations that required actual self-sacrifice was strengthened by the shepherds of Israel, by the leaders of their generation, the offshoots of Moses, so that it would be a faith that dictated self-sacrifice. So based on the above, we can say that in those leaders, the idea of the shepherd of faith in this aspect was manifest in a greater way than in Moses himself. In other words, through the persecution, the two aspects of Moses we're referring to, both the ability to sacrifice one's personal desires for the sake of Torah and mitzvahs, and the second, to actually internalize that and learn Torah and mitzvahs and internalize that faith, rather. So that first aspect of life or death scenario, it seems the other shepherds of faith in the other generations, in a certain way, seem to manifest this aspect of Moses even greater than Moses did himself. For the extraction and revelation of the faith of the soul's essence through Moses and his offshoots in every generation becomes manifest primarily through self-sacrifice. It is well known that the demonstration of actual self-sacrifice for Torah and mitzvahs by all of Israel occurred during the story of Purim, during the period of Haman's persecution. The self-sacrifice of Hanukkah during the period of the Syrian Greek persecution was demonstrated primarily by Mattityahu and his sons, whereas the self-sacrifice that occurred during the period of Haman's persecution was exhibited by all of Israel. Accordingly, we can explain the Midrash's statement cited in the discourse that Mordechai in his generation was equal to Moshe in his. Although the offshoot of Moshe exists in every generation, nevertheless, the Midrash states that Mordechai specifically was equal in his generation to Moshe in his. It can be said that one of the virtues of Mordechai, the Jew, was that, even in a revealed way, he was the shepherd of faith of all Israel in his generation. In this way, Mordechai is similar to Moshe, the shepherd of faith who imparted da'as to all of Israel in his generation, as evident also from the fact that Moshe's generation, of all generations, is called the generation with da'as. The difference is that with Moshe, the revelation of this concept, being the shepherd of faith of all Israel, occurred through his imparting das to the people of generation, while with Mordechai, this concept was revealed through his revealing the capacity of self-sacrifice within all the people of his generation. It can be said that by citing the Midrash's statement that Mordechai in his generation was equal to Moshe in his generation, that the Rebbe rules regarding himself that he is the shepherd of faith in a revealed way of all of the people of his generation. So now the Rebbe is referring to the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, and thereby, in a backwards sort of way, referring to himself as the leader of Chabad. That as the leader of the generation, that the Rebbe himself is strengthened in his own ability to help the Yidden in our own Kabbalah soil, in our own service of God, in our own self-sacrifice. And we can now explain the connection and order of the concepts in the discourse in the explanation of the verse, Adar I, you shall command, referencing again Moshe. So we said in the beginning, why was it necessary for this mitzvah for God to specifically add the ve'ata? That Moshe had to understand that he was the one to command. So the Rebbe interprets this to mean that Moshe himself is the one who binds the children of Israel with the infinite light, Tetzaveh, to unify, to bind, by feeding and sustaining their faith. He then explains that the shepherds of Israel in every generation also strengthen Israel's faith, just like Mordechai, who strengthened Israel's faith to stand strong in the study of Torah and fulfillment of mitzvahs. The Rebbe then interprets crushed forth the luminary from the verse, and you shall command, which apparently refers to Moshe himself, to mean that Moshe's revelation of Israel's luminary, the soul's essence, occurs primarily through his offshoots during the time of exile. In other words, at the time when they're being crushed, who awaken within Israel their power of self-sacrifice, which causes the primary revelation of the soul's essence, luminary. That the idea, again, we went before, what does it mean being crushed for the luminary as opposed to being crushed for the luminescence, crushed for the sake of the fire? So what is the luminary? The luminary is the place within a person's soul that the crushing of exile is going to reveal, the place within their soul where, just like Moshe was able to inspire his people with true das and understanding, and just like Mordechai was able to inspire his people with true self-sacrifice for Torah and mitzvahs, that a person can crush themselves, so to speak, be crushed through exile to the place where they themselves experience that connection with God and even a deeper connection. According to the above, the concept of crushed for the luminary pertains to, and you shall command the children of Israel, to the fact that Moshe and his offshoots in every generation connect and bind Israel with the infinite light. In the verse, however, crushed for the luminary, infinite light, what do we mean to say infinite light? When we reference Hashem, light, again, like revelation, that which was concealed becomes revealed, and to God himself, obviously nothing is concealed, but also that everything, that light in its very attributes and its very form, its so to speak abstractness and lightness, that it's not a physical thing, it's not something that can be truly defined, and it contains infinite aspects to it. In the verse, however, crushed for the luminary follows, and they shall bring to you pure olive oil. So the concept of that they shall bring to you is that it increases the light within Moshe. So this is going to require explanation. The verse, and the Jews accepted what they had begun to do, speaks in the verse's straightforward sense of the period following the miracle of Purim. Now the Rebbe writes in his discourse that the phrase, and the Jews accepted what they had begun to do, means in the days of Achashverosh, they accepted what they had begun in Matan Torah. So this interpretation that we understood from before can be applied to the straightforward implication of the verse, which is, and the Jews accepted, referring to the period following the miracle of Purim. In other words, we're saying again that to reinforce the idea that the Moses of every generation serves as a binding and unifying of the Jewish people with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with God, through their emunah, through their faith. That again, the phrase, rather the pasuk, that the Jews accepted what they had begun to do, and the interpretation that what did we begin to do? We began in Matan Torah, and we're now accepting through our Kabbalah soul, through the difficulties and the persecutions, we're accepting Torah mitzvahs in a deeper way, and this again is reinforcing the idea that it's the Rebbe of each generation, the leader of each generation, that comes to do this and help us do this. Consequently, the idea that during the days of Achashverosh they accepted what they had begun in Matan Torah contains two concepts. One, their acceptance through self-sacrifice under persecution, as we've said explicitly. But two, also their acceptance during the period following the miracle of Purim, which is even loftier than their acceptance under persecution, as we will continue to explain. In other words, what is greater? When the enemy threatens your life, tells you if you learn Torah, if you put on tefillin, if you do these things, not only will we mock you and shame you, but we will kill you, heaven forbid, and to do it anyway with faith that Hashem has your back. Or, after the fact, after the Purim story, when the Jewish people were again living in peace, and again living in a time of no pressure, where they had the choice again. They could freely serve God, or they could freely, heaven forbid, do the opposite. So the Rebbe explains that it's actually even more difficult, and even deeper revelation of godliness, that in that time when they weren't being persecuted after the Purim story, those who continued to observe Torah and mitzvahs, that this is the real deep revelation of godliness that we were looking for from the whole Purim story. Similarly, it can be said that the concept of crushed for the luminary, that the luminary itself is reached through the experience of being crushed through exile, contains two concepts. Firstly, it refers to when Israel is in a state of crushed. In other words, while Israel's in Galut, in exile. So there are decrees against the observance of Torah and mitzvahs, as the time when the original Maamar, the original discourse, was delivered, through which they reach the luminary through self-sacrifice. In other words, the Rebbe is pointing out that also when the Friedrich Rebbe gave this discourse, they would have been experiencing persecution. And also back then, they can reach the luminary, the place within themselves, the revelation of their soul, where they're infinitely connected with Hashem, and they would have, even through their own understanding, a desire and a love to serve Him. Secondly, crushed for the luminary means that even when the people of Israel enjoy prosperity, physical and spiritual, but are in exile. So like we said before, after the Purim story, where we're still in a place of exile, technically, where godliness is not revealed, but we have the freedom now to choose whether or not we're going to serve Him or not. This is similar to their condition after the miracle of Purim, when for the Jews there was light and joy, gladness and honor, in both the literal and spiritual levels. Furthermore, even the house of Haman was given to Esther, even when the lofty experience of transformation occurred then, yet we are still the servants of Achashverosh. So we brought a few psukim to prove that even though the life of the Jewish person had become so relieved, so to speak, that even the house of Haman was given to Esther, and there was a true transformation of evil to goodness, but it wasn't a full transformation, because we were still servants of Achashverosh, we were still exiled from the land of Israel, and we were broken and crushed by the fact that we are in exile, and through their feeling of being crushed, due to their being in exile, Israel reaches the luminary. So the concept is as follows. Israel is broken by the fact of being in Golus and being in exile, even while enjoying the physical and spiritual prosperity, because the true desire of every Jew is divine revelation. So much so that this divine revelation matters to him to the essence of his being. Consequently, the fact that during exile divine revelation is not present, as it was during the time of the temple era, especially when a Jew considers the Talmud's statement, whoever does not see the rebuilding of the temple in his days, it is as though it was destroyed in his days. This itself makes him completely shook up and crushed. So now we're saying there's two layers of crush. There's the first layer of, that's a much deeper layer. The first layer of crush is an external layer of crushes. Life is hard. I don't have money for this. I need money for that. My job is hard. I'm struggling with my wife and my friends, etc. These are real things. There's no question. But a much deeper layer of crushed, when a Jew has reached a place where they're so connected with Hashem, where these are not seen as challenges, but rather opportunities to connect to Hashem, and they don't bring turmoil to the person, but they bring simcha, they bring joy. Not the fact that things are not necessarily perfect, but the fact that there's an opportunity to make correction, an opportunity to make things good. So once a person reaches such a level, they're still going to be at a level where they realize, but okay, godliness is still not revealed in the world. Even though my life is good, Baruch Hashem, and it seems like things are going well and moving in a positive direction, etc., and my family is healthy, but godliness is not revealed, and that's the ultimate purpose of creation, so that really a holy or refined person is going to be crushed by this thoughts, by this, their heart will be crushed. So even if he's on an extremely lofty level where divinity is apparent to him in a manner comparable to the revelation of the temple era, nevertheless, the absence of this revelation in the world at large indicates that the revelation he experiences is also a limited one. In other words, even if a Rebbe, even if the most incredible, holy Jew sees things from a purely godly perspective, so even his perspective is immensely limited, though, by the fact that the whole world is limited, and if the world had revealed godliness, so seemingly the Rebbe's perspective would increase infinitely just to the same degree, if not greater, than the rest of us would increase by that revelation. So when the revelation of boundless, infinite light shines, the revelation reaches every place. If there is any place, even a remote corner of the world, where divine revelation does not radiate, it is because the revelation is a limited one. So the idea is expressed by the statement cited in the discourse by the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, in the name of Tikkunim, which says that were even one tzaddik to return with complete tshuva, Mashiach would come in his generation. For complete tshuva draws forth the revelation of the boundless infinite light, and this revelation reaches every place. So the fact that the revelation of the essence, the infinite light, is not apparent to him, causes it to be broken and crushed, katit. In other words, there's a place within Hashem, and within every single Jewish soul, where the boundless infinite light of Hashem is drawn, and this is drawn through the act of tshuva, of returning to Hashem. And that if a righteous person, a tzaddik, was capable of doing this right now, so this light would be revealed and all evil would be removed from the world, Mashiach would come immediately. So the fact that this revelation has not been revealed yet causes the tzaddik, even the righteous person, to be broken and crushed. And this is similar to the idea that chole, which is the Hebrew word for an ill person, is numerically equivalent to 49, which signifies that when a person has grasped the 49 gates of Bina, but still lacking the 50th gate, he is considered ill. The 50 gates of Bina, the 50 gates of wisdom, of understanding, that the 50th, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, was given on the day that he passed, to fully understand Hashem and his, so to speak, designs, and why he does what he does. So there are 50 gates, and a person obviously, seemingly, you don't get 10 gates at a time, right? A person levels up, and they gain more and more understanding. And even at the 49th gate of almost complete understanding, it's considered as if they have none. They're considered a sick person, says Tyra, which is the illusion of the fact that the word sick is numerically equivalent to the value 49. So again, lacking the full 50, so he's considered ill. Similarly, says the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, that one would hear our master and teacher, the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe, say, I want nothing at all, I don't want Gan Eden, I don't want your world to come, I want nothing but yourself. Ich will nicht dan Gan Eden, ich will nicht dan Olam Haba, v'chulu. Try to give it a little Yiddish there. I don't speak Yiddish myself, but we thought we'd throw it in. V'chulu meaning, etc., but I don't know the Yiddish for nothing but Hashem himself. Einay milvado. There's nothing else but you. And so this is what the Alter Rebbe would scream, the first Rebbe of Chabad would scream in his davening, in his prayers to Hashem. In other words, there's no aspect, there's no external part of God that I want. Nothing he created, nothing he made, nothing, only God himself. So by the fact that this statement was heard from the Alter Rebbe himself, the first Rebbe, since the meaning of one would hear is that he did not just say it on special occasions, but rather repeated it often, and especially after the Tzemach Tzedek publicized it, the potential has been given to every single Jew to be a person whose primary desire is the revelation of the essence. So in other words, the fact that we even know this statement and that it was publicized by the Rebbeim is within itself the Rebbeim letting us know that this is something that's accessible and available to us. So much so that in the absence of this revelation, certainly in the period of Galus and exile, when the revelation of light that radiated during temple days is absent, so a Jew is in the state of being crushed. So even more so, now that we understand that this level of light is accessible to us, and even more so that we don't have it at the moment, so we should feel more crushed. And when we request 3 times or more each day during davening that our eyes should see as you return to Zion with mercy, referring to a time when there will be divine revelation, even the revelation of the essence. So all of this should crush us, so to speak, spiritually, not physically. We don't want to be depressed. Heaven forbid, we're not allowed to be. Forbidden. This, then, is the meaning of crushed for the luminary. That this feeling of being crushed, of being in exile, brings one to the luminary, what we said before, that essence of the soul. For the desire of every Yid every Jew, for divine revelation, a desire of such intensity that it affects his very essence, which is why he is broken and crushed by the absence of divine revelation during exile, is itself an expression of his soul essence, the luminary of the soul whose bond with divinity is an innate one. It can be said that the dimension of the soul's luminary that is revealed through the feeling of being, quote, crushed because of exile is loftier than the dimension of the soul's luminary that is revealed through self-sacrifice. And the concept is as follows. So we're bringing back from before, when we were talking about the time of Purim and the Jews, how they were trying to serve God under persecution versus why it's even higher to serve God after the persecution was over. And these are referencing the two levels of the soul we know as luminary. The external one being self-sacrifice, but the internal, even loftier one is the feeling, or rather comes about through the feeling of being crushed. The concept is as follows. One of the reasons that Matan Torah there was only a beginning, and in the days of Achashverosh in the Purim story there was an acceptance, is because when they said we will do, before they will listen, we will listen rather at Matan Torah, Nasev and Ishma, first we said we will do. We did it because God held the mountain over them like a vat, is a pasuk from Shabbos, Gemara Shabbos 40 or 88a. So God held the mountain over them like a vat, in other words, that we were pressured, so to speak, as a revelation from on high, that it was such an overwhelming experience, so we're going to say no? There wasn't an option. In the days of Achashverosh, by contrast, the acceptance of God and His Torah was by their own volition, in the absence of such a revelation. So when God doesn't reveal Himself, He gives us that chance for free choice, and it's in that free choice, that lacking of revelation, in that empty space, so to speak, that vacuum, that the greatest holiness can be revealed. So it can be said that the faith of Israel, that stems from the heavenly soul's divine vision, so we were saying before that my mazel sees, this faith based on a cause, on something I've experienced or I can sense, is similar to the prefacing of we will do and we will listen. So in other words, the response that we had in Matan Torah, which is the correct response, when Hashem tells you to do something, you say, I'm going to do it, and then I'm going to listen. In other words, I'll do what you say, and then I'll question you, but I'm going to do it first. And this is the correct response, right? When you're standing in front of a king, you do what the king tells you. But when you leave the king for a moment, and the king's not forcing you to do anything, so now the reason why you make the choice is going to be a much deeper choice. Now it's going to come from a place of yourself. The king's not even watching. He won't even know if I don't do it. What does he care? So maybe I want to do what the king wants because I want to do what the king wants. It's going to come from me. More specifically, it may be said, even in the revelation of the soul's essence, there exists the parallel of these two dynamics. Regarding the revelation of the soul's essence through the experience of self-sacrifice, it can be said that as far as the conscious faculties are concerned, the soul's revelation is like an additional extraneous presence. As we in fact observe, there were many people who, when living in a place where observance of Torah mitzvahs was prohibited, exhibited actual self-sacrifice for many years. Yet, when they later migrated to countries where Torah mitzvahs can be performed without constraint, the self-sacrifice they previously possessed is not so apparent. In other words, we're citing relative modern-day examples of people who experienced similar to the Purim story, where when they were under persecution, this is what itself inspired them to be more religious, but the second the persecution ended, so they weren't so interested anymore. And we see this maybe, heaven forbid, in modern-day Israel, or people who left the Soviet Union. Just as one example, obviously there are many, not to speak ill of anyone, heaven forbid. It's a common phenomenon of the Jewish nation for thousands of years. So the Rebbe says this is because the reason they stood with self-sacrifice for many years is that they experienced the revelation of the soul's essence. They experienced it during the time of persecution. They actually experienced that essence of the soul, which transcends their conscious understanding, and therefore does not create change within the conscious faculties. So the fact that it transcended their understanding, which is a beautiful thing and an amazing thing, that it caused them to not go based on their understanding and serve God regardless for whatever reason, their Jewish pride, their soul's essence. So what's the problem though? It doesn't impact their conscious faculties, which is what Moshe ultimately wants, what Moses ultimately wants. So the fact that the soul's essence is also the essence of the conscious faculties, like we said before, means that the soul's essence is their essence, but this does not relate to the nature of their conscious faculties themselves due to their character. So in other words, the essential nature of the soul, because of the essential nature of conscious faculties, of thought, right, of speech and action, So the essential nature of the soul, they don't relate very well. So it seems very distant, but we understand that essence to expression is equidistant. So just as far as my soul in its essence is from my conscious faculties, is just as far as it is from my faith in God, as something else that's external to me. By contrast, when the soul's essence is revealed because of the brokenness of being in exile, its conscious faculties are as if one with the essence. That my actual machshava dibur ma'isa, my thought, speech, and action, my das, my understanding is actually aligned with the essence of my soul, that my own thoughts will comprehend, my own mind will comprehend godliness, and that I'm, the idea that I'm supposed to be committed to Torah and mitzvahs, and that Hashem created me, not in an abstract way, and my love for Hashem and my awe of Hashem, not in an abstract way, but in a conscious way. And this occurs through exile itself. Now, the reason that the soul's essence and the character of the faculties are like two separate things is because even the soul's essence is characterized by some category, and its category transcends the character of the faculties. But from the perspective of the soul's essence, as it is rooted in the divine essence, the simple, undefined abstractness of the soul and its character of its faculties are all one. So it can therefore be said that the aspect of the soul's luminary that is revealed through self-sacrifice is the soul's essence, and is characterized and limited by the reality of undefined abstractness, which transcends the character of the faculties. By contrast, the dimension of the soul's luminary that is revealed through feeling crushed because of being in exile is the revelation of the soul's essence that is rooted in the divine essence. In other words, the reason why a person does not experience consciously the faith that they experience through self-sacrifice is because this aspect of the soul is actually rooted in a place of abstractness, in a place of, so to speak, aloofness, not pure connection to the problem at hand as it speaks, to the world at hand. And so it does not allow that at the end of, so to speak, this experience, that the person should consciously recognize the totality of what they experienced. But the aspect of the soul's luminary that we were talking about that's revealed in this process, the essence aspect that's being crushed, and being revealed rather through being crushed, is the revelation of the soul as it's rooted in the divine essence, and thereby can be felt and experienced in my own conscious faculties, even after the crushing. So the above can be connected with the discourse's interpretation of the verse, of the entire discourse, that you shall command the children of Israel, and they shall bring to you olive oil. That after Moses binds and connects the children of Israel with the infinite light, that Israel then brings to Moshe olive oil, meaning that through their divine service, Israel increases the revelation of light in the level of Moses. One of the explanations of this as it relates to man's divine service is as follows. That Moses binds and connects the children of Israel means that he feeds and sustains their faith, so that their faith not only be not only as derived from the soul's revelations, i.e. from the fact that the heaven-bound part of the soul, quote, sees divinity, but also derived from the soul's essence. It can be said that this is the meaning of the verse, and you shall command the children of Israel. The expression, and you shall command, implies that Moshe is the mitzaveh, is the binder and uniter, and that the children of Israel with each other, since from the perspective of the soul essence, they are all one. And through Israel's service, after receiving the revelation of the soul's essence through Moshe, of aligning their conscious faculties, the character of their faculties with the soul's essence, which Moshe draws and reveals within them, and they shall bring to you, is enhanced. For through this process, the soul's true root, as it is rooted in the divine essence, becomes revealed within the soul. It may be noted that the unity of the Jewish people is enhanced thereby as well. When derived from the revelation of the soul's essence within them, their unity is like something additional to their being. Consequently, this unity is achieved only when they make their souls primary and their bodies secondary. That through the revelation of the soul's essence, as is rooted in the divine essence, through which the character of the conscious faculties are also one with the essence, the unity of Israel occurs in all their matters, including those that relate to the body. According to the above, we can understand the discourse's statement that through Israel's enhancing Moshe's stature, through their service, there will be a constant flame. For it would seem that the constancy, i.e. the quality and consistency of the soul's flame, a divine flame, the soul of man, is due to the revelation of the soul's essence, which is brought forth by Moshe and you shall command, since the soul's essence is not susceptible to change. The discourse, however, says that the concept of constant flame is achieved through Israel's enhancement of Moshe's stature, and they shall bring to you. And this requires explanation. Then, in other words, we said before that Moshe himself is enhanced like a mind that leads the body through the work of the Jewish people. But how does this connect with the actual verse? And why is it relevant that we need to bring to Moshe the oil and that this is going to lift up the constant flame? It can be said that the revelation of the soul's essence in a manner of from above to below, through and you shall command, that there's a difference between evening and morning. That the primary revelation of the soul's essence occurs in the presence of concealments, evening, a condition that awakens and reveals the power of self-sacrifice. And as explained above regarding those who acted with self-sacrifice during the times of persecution, when they later came to a place where they can engage in Torah and mitzvahs comfortably, morning, their earlier self-sacrifice can no longer be detected within them. So we know from the story of Adam and Chava, of Adam and Rishon, Adam and Eve. So Adam, just to make it a little dramatic, nighttime had never occurred for Adam and Eve. They were born in the 10th, 11th hour of the day, between 10 and 11, I believe. And their first day was the 6th day, so they came right into Shabbos, Holy Shabbos Kodesh. And for the sake of Shabbos, they were not yet sent into exile. It was only Motzi Shabbos, at the end of the Sabbath, that they were sent into exile. So they had never yet experienced darkness. The night had never come yet. So the first Saturday night, as light starts to come down, and Adam and Chava are confused and scared as the sun leaves. So Hashem tells them not to worry and gives them a flint and helps Adam and Eve start their first fire and shows them the power of light in darkness and provides Adam and Chava with their first lesson, their first metaphor for why they were sent into a dark place to begin with, only so that they should be the flame. So the true constant flame that is not susceptible to change occurs through the service of Israel. That even when the conscious faculties become one with the soul's essence, and they shall bring to you. So we're now talking about the aspect of the Jew, of the Jewish soul that is completely uncorruptible, and how to connect this essential aspect of the Jewish soul to the actual conscious faculties of a Jew, not to be some abstract thing that we live up or attempt to live up to, but to be a reality that we experience. Not like the Jews in the time of Purim, who due to their self-sacrifice and their persecution were capable of fulfilling Torah mitzvahs, but only while being persecuted. And then during the metaphorical daytime, when things were easygoing, were not able to maintain because they didn't have that inspiration from within. But rather, according to the above, we can explain why crush for the luminary appears in continuation, and they shall bring to you. So why is the idea of that essential light being revealed connected with bringing that light to Moses? Because being crushed for the luminary includes the idea that Israel is broken and crushed because of the exile. And this feeling results from Israel's service in ensuring that even their conscious faculties are aligned with the soul's essence. And the luminary of the soul, which becomes revealed through this process, is the soul's essence as it is rooted in the divine essence. Consequently, crushed for the luminary appears in continuation, and they shall bring to you. That the straightforward meaning of and you, Moses, shall command the children of Israel, and they shall bring to you, is that Moses is the one to command the children of Israel, shedding insight into the inner meaning of the verse as well. That Moses himself connects and binds the children of Israel in such a way that he imparts to them the potential to fulfill, and they shall bring to you as well. In other words, that this command, that the essence of the Jewish soul should be revealed, that every Jewish person should be able to serve God completely unbound by their outside circumstances, is something not possible without a Rebbe, without a Jewish leader to show us the way. Likewise, with regard to the Moses of our generation, the Rebbe himself referencing the Friedrich Rebbe, the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, but for us, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, The Rebbe, leader of our generation, his efforts to awaken and reveal the faith of the soul's essence within every single Jew is such that afterward they would serve God with their own faculties, even becoming constant flames, which cannot change even as far as the conscious faculties are concerned. Through this, we literally soon merit the true and complete redemption, the time when divine revelation will occur, even because of the lower creatures, when the bringing of the oil and the lighting of the lamps, and they shall bring to you to raise up a constant flame, will occur even in a physical sense in the third holy temple with the true and complete redemption through our righteous Mashiach. Bakar of Mamish, literally soon. Amen. L'chaim u'livracha.